Okay, so hi everyone. For those of you who aren't aware, I'm Lorraine. I'm Lorraine Afrani, and I also go by the Mummy Medic on Instagram. And yeah, I'm currently a second year graduate entry medical student at the University of Nottingham. So yeah, it's been a very long and winding road for me to get to where I am right now. But from the beginning, I'm from London originally, Southeast London, youngest of three children, and yeah, I came from quite humble beginnings. Um, in secondary school, I was always interested in science, even from primary school even. I always wanted to do something sciencey. So started off wanting to be a vet and then along the line wanted to become a doctor. And luckily for myself, I wasn't always finding school difficult, sorry. So school was quite all right for me. I was in top set for everything. But it was more my concentration and like my motivation, dedication, all those sort of words. So yeah, it was quite tough for me to focus. And so I was predicted A stars and A's for GCSEs, but I ended up getting five A's, four B's, and one, which is still pretty good considering. But for medical school at the time, that wasn't exactly going to cut it. And I thought there would be other routes and ways for me to get into it, but the teachers weren't very, how can I say, like helpful, to be honest. When I went to college with my GCSEs, the first thing that the chemistry teacher told me was, "You're never going to be a doctor with these grades," which I thought, okay, great. So what can I be? Sort of thing. And I was always in like gifted and talented and that sort of thing, like taken we went on trips to like Oxbridge and that sort of stuff. So it was really great. But I didn't really have anyone to really give me that push. And when it came to A levels, I chose biology, chemistry, psychology, and then drama just for something different. But then the same chemistry teacher ended up being my chemistry teacher, and I didn't really feel like he was he wasn't the best motivator, to be honest. And I found it all quite tough at the time. Now I'm not too sure when things changed to being just A levels as opposed to AS and A levels. By the time that I was doing it, we had AS, and I dropped chemistry before I even got the full AS. So in the end, I finished with a B in drama, C in biology, and a D in psychology. So pretty much my grades were just going down. And at this point, I spoke to careers advisors and they kind of just suggested the same thing. I wasn't going to get into medical school. No one really knew of any kind of alternative routes in. And at the time, I wasn't aware either. So I thought, okay, what's kind of like medicine, but less grades and that sort of thing. And in the end, I decided I'd like to be a pediatric nurse. So I thought that would be really great. And then so I applied for the University of Hertfordshire and I started a course in pediatric nursing. But I only lasted about 2 terms because anyone who's experienced nursing knows that it's a very full-on course in terms of the practical placements and whatnot. And I think nursing is an amazing career, but it just wasn't what I was looking for in terms of the decision making and just kind of making the care plan for the patient. So I just decided, okay, what else would I like to do? And I stumbled upon biomedical science. But at the time, it was too late to transfer onto the course. So I left and went to the University of Bedfordshire. And then while I was at the University of Bedfordshire, I was really enjoying biomedical science, but at the same time, once again, I was not focused. And while I was at the University of Bedfordshire, so this technically was my first year, I ended up falling pregnant with my son. So at the time, I was 19, 20 years old. And I thought, okay, so I'm out of my comfort zone here because I'm not in London with my family. I'm pregnant. Am I going to drop out of the course? Like, what does this mean for me? And really and truly, like things have a weird way of working themselves out because I was due in October, which meant that I was able to still sit my first year end of year exams. And so it didn't really set me on a bad track, basically. So I took a year out and I worked full time once I finished my maternity leave. And then the following September, I transferred to the University of Westminster in London. So as you can see already, it's a really like topsy-turvy way that I was going. But at this point, it was my second year. And at the time, I was really kind of having a tough time. And so I ended up going through depression, and I didn't really feel supported at the university because at the time someone told me that depression isn't a disability, which for anyone that's listening, if you do suffer from depression or anxiety, if you get a doctor's letter, it is actually classed as a disability. And so I was able to get extra support. But what that meant was that I had to split my second year into 2 years. So I did 3 modules one year, 3 modules the next. And so for my medical journey, so at this point, I realized, okay, there actually is another way of getting into med school, because I did my research online and found out that there was something called graduate entry medicine. And as long as I finished my biomed degree, I'd be on course for that. So yeah, I'll add this to my tips at the end, but basically, even though I knew I probably wouldn't get in at the time, I was still applying for medical school, just hoping that someone would just take a chance on me, but it doesn't exactly work like that. So the first half of my second year, I applied for the first time, was unsuccessful. The second half of my second year, I applied for the second time, I was unsuccessful. And then the third time was when I was in my final year. And at this point, I thought, okay, what can I think of a plan B as a plan B? And so I also applied for the Masters in Reproductive and Developmental Biology at the Imperial College in London. And yeah, I ended up getting a 2-2 in my biomedical science degree, which was really painful for me because I scored 59%, which was literally 1% off a 2-1. And for any of you that will end up applying for medical school, you'll see that the majority of schools are looking for a 2-1. And so once again, that was a wasted application because with a 2-2, I didn't meet a lot of the entry requirements. But one thing that I did see was that there were a sparse amount of universities in the UK that offered places to people with a 2-2, but with a master's. And so that kind of spurred me on to start the master's course. And at this point, I was tired of like falling short and not reaching my potential. So I really knuckled down, and I thought at this point, this is my last chance to get into medicine. If I don't do this right, I will not get in. And miraculously, I managed to get a distinction from that. So in the end, it all worked out. And whilst I was studying for my, while doing my dissertation, I also had to sit one of the entrance exams, which is the GAMSAT. And at this point, this was my second time sitting the GAMSAT. The first time I scored a 52, which wasn't good enough. But then at this point, I thought, okay, maybe I should focus on my dissertation. Maybe I should cancel the GAMSAT. And it was too late to cancel. And if any of you have ever sat it or thought of sitting it, you'll know it's very expensive. It was £262 at the time. So I thought, okay, I can't let my money go to waste. Let me just sit it. Let's see how it goes. And by some miracle, I managed to score a 58. And that's quite a borderline score. So the kind of score you're aiming for is like a 60. Some years the cutoff is as low as 55. So at that point, I wasn't too sure if it would be enough. But lo and behold, I started getting callbacks for interviews, and I was put on the wait list for an interview for St. George's and for Swansea. But then Nottingham, I was given an interview. And this was in December, and the interview was in December. So I was literally given like a week and a half notice to prepare. And in hindsight, I think that's a good thing, because it's always good not to over prepare when it comes to interviews. But I just went to a MMI course, so multiple mini interview course, and also just read in some interview books that people had recommended. And I went up to Nottingham, did the interview. It's pretty straightforward. And yeah, I didn't hear back from them for a long while, and other people were getting offers. And I thought, okay, cool, I'm not going to get an offer. But then in the end, I was told I was put on a wait list. So I thought, okay, this probably means I'm not going to get in. And people had already gotten offers. And my interview was one of the first interviews. And I was one of the last people to find out I actually got in, because the day that they told me my waiting list place was the same day that they told me I had actually got a place if I wanted to take it, and of course I did. I'm 27 now, and this whole wanting to get into medical school journey started when I was 17, 18. So it's been a very long journey, but yeah, it was quite difficult because also, given the fact that obviously I am a mum, my son's 7 now, there was a decision whether to just apply to London unis or unis all over the UK. And I felt just applying to London unis kind of restricted me from having extra choices. And so when I applied for Nottingham, I didn't actually tell my family because I was so sure that, oh, I can just take my son and me and him can be fine out there. But when it became a reality, that's when it sank in that I'm not going to have a support system. I'm potentially going to have to navigate getting a babysitter or like someone to take him to school, and it just wasn't viable. And my sister has a son also, so my nephew and my son actually go to the same primary school, and so it all kind of worked out well because thankfully she agreed to look after my son, and so he lives with her term time whilst I'm out here in Derby, and so my son's life hasn't been kind of uprooted, let's say, sort of thing. So I'm now in my second year. Since I've been out here, I have made some small accomplishments, sorry. So like, for example, over the first lockdown in March, I started my Instagram page, The Mummy Medic. And basically the aim of that page was just to be a platform to let people know that being a medical student doesn't mean getting straight A's at A level or GCSE. There's so many other routes and ways into medicine. And at the time, no one was there to tell me that. And so I've been inundated with messages on Instagram from people who, like me, are single parents or didn't get the best grades at school. But it's just very important for me to let everyone know that there's so many different ways in. And so also at medical school at the moment, I am currently the graduate entry medicine representative of the Obstetrics and Gynecology Society. So obs and gynae is something I'm really interested in, but anyone that will tell you from medical school that pretty much anything will tickle your fancy. I'm quite open to anything because I'm just interested in medicine as a whole. But yeah, pretty much that's my story. I don't know if it's quite a long story. I've been all around the block, but yeah.
No, I mean, in a good way, you are the opposite to what a stereotypical doctor or medical student is like. It is like a profile. You've, as you said, you've gone through struggling times of getting to medicine, but at the end of the day, you've persevered, and now you've shown you don't need to get the good grades in A levels. You don't need to do exactly well in your undergrad, but there's still a pathway for you if you still put in the time and the effort to get into medicine.
Yeah.
In terms of your first applications to medicine, was it only the GAMSAT that you sat, or did you also sit the UK CAT?
Yeah, so I sat the UK CAT, I think, so in total I applied for medical school 4 times, and I sat the UK CAT the first 3 times. So yeah, in terms of how that was, I think once again, I always advise people not to be like me and just kind of fall into just doing it. Make sure that you've prepared well, and not only your application, but your actual UK CAT prep. So like I always say with the GAMSAT versus the UK CAT, the kind of revision strategies are quite the opposite. So the GAMSAT is a marathon. You have to prepare. I always advise at least 6 months in advance. And that doesn't mean like 9 to 5 every single day, but at least little and often, so that your brain actually trains itself, like the kind of skills how to sit it. Whereas the UK CAT, I always say it's better to do like short bursts. So for example, if your exam is in August, start maybe 2 months before and just really hammer it in every single day, because with the UK CAT it's practice, definitely.
Yeah, I guess with your GAMSAT results, you had a massive improvement in the second time. How did you find the second time compared to the first time, and did you do anything differently?
So the second time, I think what was the biggest change for me was just having the experience of the first time.
Okay.
So the first time I remember being in the Excel in London, it was a massive hall and it was literally a whole day exam. I got there 8 a.m. I didn't leave until about 5, 6 p.m. It's a very long exam, obviously with breaks in between. But I think going in there, seeing literally how fast paced it is, etc. Like I realized, okay, my biggest advice and my biggest change when I did the first and second was knowing it inside out. I mean, literally looking at the clock every single 15 minutes, knowing that I should be 12 questions ahead. If I'm behind, I need to speed up. If I'm ahead, I know I need to take more time. And something I always say about the GAMSAT, there are either questions that are just 2 lines long, and there are questions that are a whole page long, but they're all worth the same amount of marks. So if you feel like you're spending too long on one question and you don't know it, if giving you another 20 seconds on it is really going to make a difference and you are going to get it, okay, take another 20 seconds. But if after 20 seconds you're still going to be lost, guess and move on. Because I think the biggest thing I always hear from people when it comes to the GAMSAT is, I ran out of time, I didn't answer all of the questions. And it's not negative marking. So if you run out of time and you haven't answered 15 questions, that's 15 marks definitely lost. So I always say try and like practice having the stamina to just get through the pace of the exam.
Yeah, I think that's the case for both the UK-CAT and well, it's the UCAT now. The UCAT and the GAMSAT is, yes, one is a sprint and one is a marathon, but you still need to know how to push yourself through that timing. I guess it just comes down to revision and having known, as you said, you knew what questions were coming up, so you didn't get any surprises which kind of knocked you off your role. If that makes sense. I mean, reflecting on your first application as a whole into medicine, did you do any extracurriculars like volunteering or?
Yeah, so all along I knew that I had to like kind of build up my CV, as it were. So at the very beginning, I started off by volunteering for a charity called Bliss, which is a charity for premature babies and sick babies and their families. And so I would go into St. Thomas's Hospital in London about once or twice a week and just signpost the families to different services that may help them. But then also one thing that I did was, it's a bit different now because of COVID times, but I would literally go on every single hospital in London, work through their directory and email every single doctor with like a personalized kind of cover letter saying, hi, my name's Lorraine, I'm an aspiring medical student, could I please shadow you, this sort of thing. And I made sure that each one was personalized, so it had their name in it. Now, I always say, if I sent out, let's say 100 emails, probably only 20 replied and probably only 5 of them said yes. But the fact that I got those yeses, I was able to get a lot of shadowing experience. But I always say to people also, even if you just shadow one doctor, it's always about quality, not quantity. So they don't care that you shadow the top neurosurgeon in St. George's Hospital. They care about what you learned from your experience. And so even if you can't shadow a doctor, if you could shadow a nurse or anyone a part of the multidisciplinary team, you can still get an insight into what working in the NHS is about, for example. But those are the main things.
Yeah, I totally agree. Going back to your masters, obviously going into a graduate entry course, you have a vast amount of experience compared to the undergraduates, and even not comparing to the A-level students. So how did you find that transition? Did you feel like you were more prepared? You had a one step up onto everybody else, or was it more of just a level playing field for everybody?
Do you mean the transition from the master's to medical school? Or?
Yeah.
So yeah, I felt as though at the beginning, that's how I felt. I felt as if I had kind of a head start because not every medical school is like this, but Nottingham, they accept non-science backgrounds as well. So some people came from history or geography, for example. Um, but that only pretty much lasted for the first module because medical school is so intense. Graduate entry especially, we do 6 modules in a year compared to about 2 modules a year for the undergrads. So it's a bit wild. And the very first module was based on, it was called Structure, Function, and Defense. So it's all of your basic biosciences and that sort of thing. So I think everyone should feel okay at that stage, but then afterwards, it's definitely a level playing field.
Yeah. So I guess what does a typical day at Nottingham Medical School like? Obviously, we've had different speakers from all around the country at this. So, from your perspective, what is a typical day like as a medical student?
So I'll take it to pre-COVID times because hopefully things will go back. But we were in 4 days a week. So Monday would be lecture day. We'd have anything between 2 to 5 lectures on the Monday. And then Tuesday would be clinical skills and PBL day. So PBL, problem-based learning, is the style of the course at Nottingham. And pretty much what that is breaking off into groups of about 8 and given a new case study patient every single week. And all you're given is their presentation. And from that, we need to make up our own learning objectives and what we want to learn from the case and what we need to know in order to come back to the case the following Friday to do an examination and a history taking. So throughout the week, that's what we do. And then on the Wednesday, we have anatomy workshop. So we will go in, we have pro sections at Nottingham. So what that means is we don't have cadavers, but we have sections of cadaveric material, and we can just look at structures. And we have a workbook that we have to fill out every single week pertaining to the anatomy that we're learning of that week. Thursday is our day off. Beautiful, because we always need that. So we use that for extracurriculars or to catch up on work. And then Friday would be part 2 of the PBL case. So we've come back with the information that we've gathered. We examine and do the history of the fake patient. And then the following Tuesday, we start with the ending of that PBL case. So we've got two bits of PBL on a Tuesday, if that makes sense. The first session is wrapping up the case from the week before. Then the first session is a brand new case. And then the second session on the Friday is examination and history. So yeah, that's our week in a nutshell. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah. So I guess the transition from obviously myself and my cohort being on a biomedical science degree.
Yeah.
It must have been a very different transition from, I'm guessing you had very lecture-based material. You sat in a lecture hall and somebody spoke to you for 2 hours straight. Yeah. How did you find the transition from the lecture material to problem-based to problem-based lectures, really?
Yeah, it's quite, I feel like for me personally it was okay because of the fact that I have worked, so I didn't actually add between my master's and getting into Nottingham, I actually worked for a year full-time as a healthcare assistant in a sexual health clinic. So I think taking histories and doing research into patients and that sort of thing it wasn't alien to me, but at the same time, coming from a biomedical science degree where, like you said, probably like yourself, it was just lectures all week, probably the odd practical here or there. I feel as though the difference was the level of self-directed study on this course is astronomical. You only have the 1 day of lectures, and then after that, it's your revision, your research for your patient, that sort of thing. And so I think probably the hardest part for me was more the self-directed study and then also group work, because technically the whole time it's group work. You all have to come together and piece all the information that you've all contributed together. So yeah, if you're not used to group work, you better get used to it. It's an insight into what we'll be doing as doctors anyway.
Yeah, so I guess for future medical students watching this, in terms of their application and studying in medical school, is there any like golden points you'd be able to give them at like securing a slot at becoming a doctor, or any tips you give them in becoming a doctor through medical school?
So I made a little list of like top tips. Okay, so I always say to people, where possible, prepare 2 years in advance to your like wanted start date. And I know that sounds a lot, but really and truly it goes by so quickly. The reason why I say that is because you really want to build up the best kind of self portfolio. As everyone says, medicine's very competitive. GEM is even more competitive because there's many people like myself that needed an alternate route, and everyone pretty much has done a course before or has something to bring to the table. So what do you do to up your chances? First and foremost, be realistic. Don't be like me and just apply on a whim. Wait until you've actually got all of the requirements that a university is looking for. So for example, I used to apply to universities that wanted 2 with a 2-2. I'm not going to get in, obviously. So don't do that. But what I always say also is apply strategically. So what does that mean? Firstly, cast your net out wide. Someone like me who comes from London, London is most heavily subscribed, and so just applying to London universities will get me nowhere. So I cast my net out wide. And what I also did was look into the applicant to interview ratio. So for example, Nottingham has the smallest ratio in terms of who applies, who gets to interview, and who gets a place. On average, 10 people apply for every place, and of those that apply, it's a 3 in 1 chance. 1 in 3 chance, sorry, 1 in 3 chance of getting in once you have an interview. So if you've reached interview stage, there's quite a high chance that you will get called back. And if not called back, put on a wait list like myself and then get in. So yeah, some people like to apply for, like, for example, Oxford. If that's you, go for it, of course. It doesn't matter what medical school you graduate from. Everyone becomes a doctor at the end of the day, and we're all going to be ranked against everyone in the whole nation when we're applying for foundation training. So apply strategically. Choose an entrance exam of choice. So obviously, if you're going to apply for different universities, there's a chance that you might be sitting the BMAT, UCAT, and the GAMSAT. It's probably better that you try and focus on one of those so that you can definitely get a good chance. So I didn't really have a choice really, because I had to apply to GAMSAT unis because they were the ones that were quite lenient in terms of entrance criteria. So yeah, and also I say, if you don't ask, you don't get. So like I said before, even now, lots of people are offering like online work experience and whatnot. So definitely start building your work experience kind of portfolio from early. Email doctors if you need to, ask for like virtual work experience, that sort of thing. But also just make sure that you are documenting everything you do. So like I said before, it's not a case of quantity, it's definitely quality. One thing that universities always want to know is, what have you learned from your experience? So it's not that, oh, I've seen a surgery and I managed to secure 3 days in an obstetrics clinic. It's, I saw a multidisciplinary team meeting and I learned how to work in a team, and I learned that this is what I need to do in order to be a good doctor in the future, XYZ sort of thing. Make a diary of that, because not only will it help you for your personal statement, but when you get your interview, when you go to interview, a lot of the interview questions will be centered around what you learned. And so it will be very good for you to be able to just flip back to your notes. rabbiting on here, but I've got 2 more points. Don't over prepare. So if you do get an interview, don't over prepare for it, because it's risking sounding too rehearsed, and everyone can see that a mile off. Remember, the people who are interviewing you have done hundreds of these before. Just give your best shot of and show people who you are, because at the end of the day, you are unique. No one else is you. You don't want to be anyone else. And finally, please, please, please try not to pay for resources, because like you can get into medical school without paying for like these £1,000 courses. I think it's quite ridiculous that people charge that much. Yeah, just look out for. So one thing I would say, this is a quick plug. We Are Medics on Instagram have an amazing catalogue of freedom of information requests for medical universities across the UK. So from that, you can garner all the stuff that I've said in terms of applicant to interview ratio and whatnot, and reasons why people didn't get in X, Y, Z. So use that to your benefit, I should say. I don't know if I even answer your question, Aaron. I hope anything.
No, yeah, I totally agree with all those points. Like from what I've been researching, like from the people that we've had on previously, the Medic Portal, Step to Med, Medic Mentor, they all have adapted to coronavirus, and they put on fantastic work experience, like virtual laboratory tours, etc. So and all of these resources are free. So I totally agree with your statement as well. You don't have to pay for any resources. There's I mean, if it benefits you, then it's there to benefit you. But again, I totally agree with your statement of you don't need to pay to be successful at the end of the day. I mean, I'd like to open up for any questions, either from yourself or Sharice, that he has for you.
What tips do I have on coping with the intensity of grad med? Organization is key. Organization. I can't speak for other courses, but my course in particular is very fast paced. The moment you fall behind, you're always going to be playing catch up. And I think also it's important to know that you're never going to be able to cover every single learning objective, and you need to be able to be okay with that. I think especially so for example, on my course, we have several streams of things that are examinable. So for example, the lectures, but not only the lectures, the learning objectives that are raised in PBL, and then the learning objectives that are raised in the anatomy workshop. And so by the end of a module, you literally have surplus of hundreds of learning objectives. What some people really live by is something called Anki. So when it is your time, you'll probably hear lots of people using it, but it's spaced repetition, basically virtual flashcards that you can make, and people really find those useful. I personally am a dinosaur, so I like handwritten flashcards. But the main thing that gets me through, I'm quite anal at the fact that I plan my days pretty much hour by hour. Like I know if I don't stick to it, it's fine, but I like to see my schedule ahead of me so that I know, okay, this is when I'm going to get this done, this is when I'm going to get that done. And I feel like planning your time and how much time you're going to allocate to each learning objective and lecture is key. But yeah, just definitely don't let things snowball, and also very importantly, also make time. Don't only just plan time for work, make time for rest, because burnout is so real at university. Everyone experiences it, and I'm sure you guys have probably experienced it on your course too. So just definitely make time for yourself as well.
Perfect. Yeah, I'd like to vouch for Anki. I hold Anki very close to my heart. It's
yeah.
especially it's been a lifesaver throughout university. So yeah, I do totally agree though with especially now with the biomed course. It's I guess you guys cover so much in a broad range,
Yeah.
and you don't really touch on the detail. Did you find that the big difference between the transition from biomed to medicine?
Yeah, I think even in my master's as well. So like biomed was definitely, yeah, like I wouldn't say it wasn't too broad, but it was definitely more depth than what we cover now. And I think one difficult thing is not like training yourself not to go down a rabbit hole, because especially where a lot of it's self-directed, you need to make sure that you just pretty much answer what they're asking you to answer. Of course, if you want to do more research into it, that's great. But like you said, I think it's a lot more breadth than depth when it comes to GEM. There's a lot to remember, a lot to remember. But yeah, just don't get too stuck into the nitty-gritty details. Because I think in biomed, I don't know about your course, did you have to do like lots of genetics and like...
So genetics next year, but
Oh.
What I found from our course is it's very like MCQ based or essay writing. But I think the difference between, and you probably be able to relate with this, is with your biomed course, you're graded on every piece of work you're done that you do. You want to be hitting 70% or more, because that first class, well, the rest of your degree with medical school, I've kind of found out that everybody graduates as a doctor at the end of the day.
Doctor, as long as you pass.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I guess, does that alleviate like the competition aspect and the stress aspect a bit, or?
See, not really, because I don't know. I think it's like the kind of type of people that this course attracts. I think everyone's naturally competitive anyway. But the way I'm not too sure if you know about like foundation training and like how it all, yeah. So on our course, the first year you just have to basically pass it to get onto the next year, and then the second year pass it to get into the clinical phase. So at the beginning, which is still very wild to me, a pass mark is about 40. So if you get over 40, so even if you get more things wrong than you got right, it's still technically passed. But anyway, yeah, all of that is fine. But then once we start the clinical phase on my course, that's when the exams start to count. So like you said, regardless, as long as you pass, you will become a doctor. But where it becomes competitive is the fact that you're going to be ranked, your educational performance measure, which is half of your kind of classification for foundation training. Half of it is ranked against your whole cohort, and then the situational judgment test is ranked against the whole nation. So for me myself, it's not that competitive because I actually get given a kind of special circumstances, given the fact that I have a child. And so the deanery that I want to apply to, as long as I meet their criteria, I will get picked for that deanery. But for everyone else that doesn't have special circumstances, that's where the competition comes in, because you need to rank all your deaneries. And if you don't do well, you're less likely to get it, X, Y, Z.
I guess that's when it becomes particularly competitive, when you're looking at the London hospitals or hospitals down south. Again, if you're based in Nottingham, it might not be such of a competitive issue, but as you said, it's always better to be first and there not be many people behind you than you be last and there's a lot of people in front of you. So I totally agree with that. Yeah, so I guess just to wrap it up, again, on behalf of everyone, the people watching and Shrews, I'd just like to say a massive thank you for taking the time out of your day to take part in this discussion.
You're very welcome. And thank you so much for having me. I mean, like I said, I didn't have things like this when I was, I don't know, 10 years ago. So I'm just glad that I can help out. And if you ever want me again, just, say the word.
So for people to follow you on your journey through medicine, and how can they do that?
So I'm only on Instagram at the moment. So my Instagram @ is the Mummy Medic, and yeah, pretty much I document everything. It's just a shame that it's coronavirus, so there's not really much to see. But yeah, I've got tips and everything on there. And also, if anyone wants to drop me an email for advice or anything, it's themummymedic@gmail.com.
Perfect. All right, thank you for that, Lorraine.
You're so very welcome, and thank you for having me once again. I hope you guys have a good evening.
You too.
Thank you. All
right,
right.
take care. Bye bye.